Before I start, I want to share with you that in Unity, we have 5 guiding principles. And the first one is God is. We believe that God is the one and only presence and power. God is all good. God is all powerful, and God is all knowledge. And God is for us. Second one is I am. And in this one, we recognize that we are emanations of the divine. The great quote that says, I am not all that God is, but all that I am is God. And that we are co-creators with God. And we have such incredible power in that. The third one is I ask. And we recognize that we ask through our consciousness. And our consciousness is what we're holding in our mind and our heart. And that we have the opportunity to shift our consciousness at any given moment. And partly we do that through affirmative prayer, which is our fourth one, prayer and meditation. And affirmative prayer is where we're bringing it into the present moment. You know, Jesus said, pray believing that you've already received it and you shall have it. So we pray giving thanks it's already done. And then meditation is such an important part, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that today. But also in meditation, it's the letting go. And you know what we're letting go of? The how. We're letting go of the how, because that's never been up to us. So we're letting go of the how and just allowing the divine to guide us. And then our last principle is I act. And it is not enough for us to know the truth, but we must live the truth that we know. Yes, we must live the truth that we know. We must take action. So today we are in the last week of a series that we have been doing called Thy Will Be Done. And speaking of will, today we're also going to be talking about the power of will. Now, every month this year, we've been talking about one of the 12 powers as discerned by Charles Fillmore, our co-founder. And Charles attributed one of the powers to each of the disciples, a placement in the body as well. So the power of will is represented by the disciple Matthew. The placement is behind the forehead, and the color is silver, hence wearing the silver today. Now, in the forefront of the forehead is our power of understanding, and understanding and will must be tied closely together, as well as the power of discernment, because we certainly want to use the power of discernment, that spiritual understanding that will help us move from our willfulness into willingness and into that greater will of God, that greater will that I promise you is always good. So let's affirm this together. God's will for me is good, more good than I can begin to imagine in my human thinking, and it is. Charles Fillmore said, in the present state of race consciousness, now think about this. This was, 100 years ago. In the present state of race consciousness, people use the intellectual will to excess. Kind of sounds like today, huh? We can see that the intellectual will is being used to excess. And he goes on to say, ours is to re-educate the will, which is the directing power of our mind, to teach it to become more receptive to spiritual motivation rather than to goals determined solely by our materialistic pursuits. To teach it to become more receptive to spiritual motivation. So, in this last week of the series on Thy Will Be Done, I want to share with you that, remind us all anyway, that the idea of this is to really merge our spiritual selves with our human self. We recognize, you're spiritual. You are. You can't be anything. You're spiritual because we've all come from the one source, and it's spirit. But we don't always live out of that spiritual nature, do we? Anybody ever do that perfectly every moment of every day? And it's okay, because we're in this human experience. And but the goal of this series has been to help us with some guidelines that she's using to really bring that spiritual self more fully in expression through our human self. So she has 5 disciplines that she shares with us in order to help us do that. And the first discipline is communion. And, this is our first principle, God first. God is. We go within. And we talked about how important it is to have that time apart, whatever that looks like for you, where you can just be still and know. Be still and know. If we never quiet our thinking minds, we can never truly discern the voice of that higher essence of us that is always going to lead us to the greater experience of this life journey. So communion. And then we talked about connection. And this was connecting with like-minded people. Isn't it great to connect with like-minded people? It absolutely is. And so we come together as this spiritual community, and we come together and we can share our ideas. We can share how these principles are working for us, or we can talk about things that aren't working for us and get some ideas on how other people have journeyed through things. And we can just be here to love each other and to support each other. And then we talked about the power, the discipline, I should say, of compassion. Compassion. Huge. Compassion is our desire to help alleviate the suffering of others. And compassion looks like, I see you. Compassion is being able to look in somebody's eyes and to really see them. And to recognize when something more is going on than perhaps what they're sharing with us. You may say to somebody, "How you doing today?" And they're like, "Oh, okay." And so you go on. But maybe in that moment you heard that, "okay." And you got a little bit closer and you said, "How are you really doing today?" And you give them that space to share or not to share, but they know that somebody cares. They know that it's more than just that passing something. And we've probably all had that experience when somebody has taken that time with us. And what a difference it's made, hasn't it? And so compassion is our willingness to show up to help alleviate the suffering of others. And then we take this compassion out into the fourth discipline, which is community. And we get outside of our homes, and we get outside of our church, and we get out into our community, and we bring that compassion with us, and with a great desire to help alleviate the suffering of others. I shared that I was going to be volunteering with Hope Connection this last Wednesday. And Hope Connection is an opportunity for homeless people or anybody who just doesn't have regular housing to come to one place. It was the Expo Center, and just get connected with all kinds of resources. And it was just an amazing thing to see. There were 120 volunteers that day, filled with compassion. They reminded us, we are here to serve. And it's always that reminder that when we are in compassion with other people, we're not better than. We're really saying, "Hey, I've been there," or "This could be me, and I just want to help alleviate that suffering." And so it was amazing to see that there were between 600 and 650 people that came to get resources and get connected with that. And it was just such a beautiful experience. And that really moved me. And excuse me for a moment, I need to cough. Okay. Into the next thing, the next discipline, which is the discipline of challenge. And I'm going to tell you that was a challenge for me. That really stretched me out of my comfort zone, because the reality for me, you guys, is I've never even come close to being homeless. I've never really been around homeless people. I've never had a reason to be. And so I was kind of uncomfortable with that, and I wanted to get comfortable. I wanted to be able to be in a place where my fear wasn't going to create a chasm between me and them. And it was just such an incredible opportunity for me to just be one with, and to not see them any differently than I see myself. So challenge, how we're talking about this today, is we're talking about spiritual challenge. We're talking about taking this now to a new level. And of course, the first part of this is through the things that we've been talking about. And that is through, really kicking up our game when it comes to communion, when it comes to connecting with each other, when it comes to compassion, and when it comes to community. That we're really going to kick that up within ourselves and make that a priority in our life. Now, as we look at today, I have a feeling that a lot of us are feeling a little bit challenged. Yes? Yeah. The reality is that 50% of the voters are happy, and they're celebrating, and we can be in that joy and that happiness and that celebration. The reality also is that 50% of the voters are grieving, and they're frustrated, and they're angry, and they're afraid. And that's okay. And we have to learn to be okay with that. All of us, whether we voted for Trump, whether we voted for Hillary, we have to learn to be okay with the reality that we have a whole group of people who are really suffering and struggling through this time. And so the challenge, that the opportunity that we have is, first of all, become okay with that and raise up in that place of compassion where we can be here for each other. And, I believe that one of the things of challenge that is coming out of this whole thing with the election is it's challenging us to be more. It's challenging us to be bigger. It's challenging us to not be able to sit back anymore and be complacent, but to say, you know what, my voice matters, but it only matters if I make my voice heard. It only matters if I stand up and stand for and do something that I haven't done in the past. And I know just here with our LGBTQ community and with the whole thing, there's fear there. And you guys, it's okay that there's fear there. I mean, there's a reason for that. Just the things that I've been hearing since the election, there's been some big time bullying going on. And so this is the time, I think, that we are all being challenged, no matter who we are, to stand up for humanity, to stand up for equality, to stand with each other and to stand for each other. Do you agree? Yes. And so the challenge that, we're really being called to this place of saying, I'm no longer going to sit in these seats and just say yes. I'm going to start doing something about it. I'm going to start standing for in a bigger way than I ever have in the past. And so this is a great opportunity as a spiritual community for us to come together and to be a part of that. And I'm really hoping that at some point we can gather together with other progressive ministries and get our energies together, because we have a lot of progressive ministries in this city. And we may not all teach the same message, but we're all on the same page when it comes to equality and humanity. And we can be a mighty force as we come together for that. So now I want to talk about God's will. And, in Unity, we say that God's will for us is good. And yet sometimes when things happen and it didn't quite fit in the plan that maybe I had, it doesn't seem like it's good, does it? And so what does this mean? How do we look at God's will as being good? Well, one of the things for me is to look at, our master, to look at Jesus. But I have to tell you that when I first looked at this, it didn't really bring me peace when I first looked at this, because I'm thinking about the story where he was in the Garden of Gethsemane and he's on his knees and he's like, Father, take this cup from me. And he's, he knows what's going to happen and and then he says, nevertheless, not my will, but thy will be done. And then he's taken into custody, and he's mocked, and he's beaten, and he's tortured, and he's painfully crucified. And I'm looking at that, and I'm going, not so much for me. I'm not really sure if I want to do this, not my will, but thy will be done, because that just didn't look very fun at all. And that's, I know for me, that's what I grew up with, thinking that's what it meant. Because, and we have this whole thing about suffering. I was thinking about the Old Testament and how, we had the period of time when they made sacrifices to appease God, and then this whole idea of suffering, you should suffer, and you'll be in the better graces of God if you suffer. And, and so then we come to, God's will for us, and that God's will for us is good. And I firmly know that to be true. No matter what all that other stuff has taught us, I firmly know that to be true for us, that God's will for us is good. So when we look at this idea of Jesus on the cross, what hit me was that Jesus always showed us in extremes. He healed the woman who had been hemorrhaging for 12 years, and he, the man by the pool of Bethesda for 30 years, and he walks, and, people had leprosy and they're healed, and people who couldn't see, and he always taught us in these extremes. And as I look at that, what I see is that no matter what it is that we go through, no matter how painful it is, no matter how sometimes we may feel that that life just isn't fair, or that people have betrayed us, and sometimes we even get to that place where we feel like we're dying, but that ultimately God's grace is what will prevail. God's goodness is what will prevail, because that's the only thing that can ultimately prevail in our lives. And Jesus showed us that, with the resurrection and the ascension, that God's grace will always prevail. And ours is to commune in a way that we can be in those times and we can say, I don't get it, and I'm hurting and I'm scared. But I know that something greater is occurring here, and I want to get out of the way so that I can allow this to occur in my life. But then we go back and we want to take it back again, don't we? We had our women's group the other night, and a lot of that for us is about control. We want to be in control, so we want things to go our way, and we want people to do the things that we want them to do because our way is the best, and da-da-da-da-da. Okay, so we were talking about Martha and Mary. And, Mary represents will as the female aspect of the Bible. Martha, did I say that? Okay, Martha. And so Martha, she was kind of a little bit bossy. She liked to kind of be in control, and so when Jesus comes and her brother Lazarus is dead and he's in the tomb, and she's like, like essentially saying, hey, if you would have gotten here sooner, none of this would have happened. And so Jesus says something about, he can be resurrected. And she's just all like, yeah, whatever, in the resurrection, I'll see him again. And so he's like, well, let's roll away the stone. And she's like, no, we're not going to roll away the stone because it's going to be a horrible stench in there. So obviously what happens is the stone is rolled away and Lazarus is raised. And then we come to the place where Jesus is in their home, and Mary is sitting at Jesus' feet. And Martha, who likes to be in control of things, man, she's in there and she's working away and she's making dinner, and she's like, but she's getting frustrated because Mary isn't doing any of it. And she thinks, what's she doing? She needs to be in here doing what I need her to do. And so she goes to Jesus. And to me, it's kind of like a little bit of being a tattletale, almost like, hey. And she's like, she isn't doing anything. And look at all the stuff that I'm doing. And essentially what he says is, Mary is doing the better part. And sometimes, for me, what this is saying is that we have got to stop pushing. We have got to stop thinking it has to be my way. And we must go to the feet of the Master, and we must just be and allow that to nurture us, and to be open to that greater realm of life, that greater realm of truth, that greater realm that continuously reminds us that it's okay and it's going to be okay. And hold on, and hold on, and hold on. It was great in our women's group, and I'm going to tell a couple stories without names, but I got so tickled by one where somebody was telling us that when she was younger, that she told God, listen now, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. So I'm putting you on notice that I'm going to marry this man. And I just want you to know that. And she prayed and prayed and prayed because she knew that this was the man that she was supposed to marry. And it didn't happen. And she was sharing with us that this was, that year was just intense grief for her. And now, we can always look back and connect the dots. She said, I saw how I would have never met my husband, and my life would not have been good with this person. And so in this pain of this separation, she had to kind of be feeling, where have you gone, God? Because this is what I told you was going to happen, and you're not making it happen. And yet, what was unfolding was the greater good of God was unfolding. And I say that because sometimes when we say that God's will for us is good, we're like, yeah, but, it doesn't always feel good. So how can God's will for me be good when maybe I've gotten an illness, or I've lost somebody very suddenly, or somebody's very dear to me, or we see the crimes that happen, we see the things that happen. How can you tell me that God's will is good. And so what I'm going to say to that is that I know that the moment that anything happens, the divine intelligence is weaving it into the tapestry of greater good for everyone. And and I look at things that have happened, and we see people who have gone through those very things, have gone through child abuse or abuse as an adult, or they've had some awful crime committed against them. And we've seen them move from this willfulness to this willingness. And we've seen it through people starting support groups for things, or people creating organizations that now make the world a better place. And so everything is being used for the greater good. And that's our opportunity all the time. And I thought, when we even see, and we've seen this public demonstration when somebody has been violently taken away, that the members of the family step up and they forgive. And they forgive. And that's the opportunity that we always have, you guys. It is the opportunity that we always have. And so these things that happen that don't feel good, the will of God is that it's going to work it into the greater good somehow. And when we take the time to be like Mary and sit at the feet of the Master, when we take that time to commune, we open out the way for it to be shown to us so that we can stay focused on it. Because when we're in that place where we're in anger and we're in fear and we stay there, we're totally closed to anything else. But once we get to that place where we can open up, that's where we start to see the next step and the next step and the next step and the next step. And I firmly believe that as we've moved through this week and a half, that there is so much good to come out of it. There's so much good, you guys, to come out of it. And as we see anytime and I know for many people, it was like a national disaster. But anytime there's a disaster anywhere, what happens? People come together. And people come together in a way that they don't see the differences, right? And so we're going to come together. We're going to come together here, we're going to come together in our community, and we're going to come together in our country. And I think we're going to find and see that people are at that place in life to say, my voice matters, and I need to stand up, and I need to make sure that my voice is heard but that my actions are done in love. But always that my actions are done in love. I know that there's something going on downtown today. I think anybody know about that? From like 2 to 4, is it? And the intention is it's a peaceful gathering to come together and to stand for humanity, to stand for equality. And I love it because the main intention of this is to be a peaceful stand. Not to come together in some negative way and scream and yell, but to come together in solidarity to say all lives matter, to say that everyone is important. And so we have these opportunities to be part of these things if that's what we choose to be a part of. But again, to make our voice heard and to stand for each other. And aren't you so ready to put this inequality stuff behind us? Aren't you so ready to not even have this have to be a topic of the day? That we're even having to talk about this anymore? We've made this progress, and I know all of a sudden it felt like it was coming to a screeching halt. And so no, we're going to keep that progress going in a positive direction, yes? And we're going to do that because we're going to challenge ourselves to step up and to be a part of that forward progress, yes? Yes, in a big way. And what an honor and a privilege, you guys, it is to be alive at this time. And I know sometimes you may not think that, but it is. Because we're the light workers. And there are millions of light workers in this country and on the planet. And as each of us comes together, that light shines more brilliantly. And I just want to remind you, God is in the midst of it. God is in the midst of it. And tremendous good is coming out of it. And that is a guarantee. So we're going to close with one more time sharing together this. Together? God's will for me is good, more good than I can begin to imagine in my human thinking. And so it is, and so it shall be. And namaste. Namaste.